As we open up the word today, we are in Matthew chapter number 5. Matthew chapter number 5, and we're continuing in a study that I've called Anointed. Anointed. And specifically, that word refers to the title that we see for Christ throughout most of the New Testament. We see for Jesus that title of Christ or Messiah, meaning the anointed one, the one that was set apart for a purpose. And as we jump into, and we're going to be in just 4 verses today. And so as we are jumping into Matthew chapter number 5, just 4 verses. So we all know what that means as far as length of sermon goes, right? It means absolutely nothing, okay? And so buckle up. We're jumping into Matthew chapter 5. I'm really excited for this passage. This is one of my favorite, really 2 of my favorite metaphors within Jesus' teaching. 2 of the best known metaphors in Jesus' teaching, as he gives these beautiful object lessons about what it means to be a part of the kingdom. And those 2 objects that he uses are everyday objects. They're objects that we, literally interact with every day. But the context that we're going to see is the context changes a little bit as times change and culture changes and things like that. How many of you noticed that things change in life? Things change, right? How many of you notice that words change in life? Right? Isn't it funny? You can't even keep up with the pace of language. How many of you, if you have a child, especially one that's middle school, high school, college age, they say something and you just look at them like, what in the world just came out of your mouth, right? I know all the words you're saying, but they don't go together. It doesn't make any sense. And even one of the words that we see right here, we see that first word that we're going to look at here in just a moment, that word salt. Well, if you say something is salty, well, right, like something, oh, that's too salty, there's too much salt in it, right? That's what the word is supposed to mean. Or maybe you're thinking if someone is salty, that was a term that came about that was like a sea captain is salty, right? Because the salt crusts their beards and they're gruff and well, today, that's neither of those is actually what it even means in common vernacular. If you say someone is salty, what does it mean? What does it mean, Michael? It means they're mad, right? It means they're like mad. They're on like the verge of like tears. They're just outraged. And that's what salty means. How many of you guys knew that's what salty means? No, yeah, like 5 of us, right? It's the words change meaning. And we could go down the list of all the different words that change meanings throughout time. And that's just the way that language works. But what I want to do today is I want to pull back some of the layers that prevent us from seeing clearly what these illustrations are meant to convey. Because in our day and in our age, we think of salt as being one thing. We think of table salt. We use it for this and for that. But mostly, we use it with our food, and that's kind of the gist of it. Well, it was used a little bit differently then, and we'll go into it. When we think of light, we have the opportunity, right, to turn on lights. And we have the opportunity to, at night, when the sun goes down, which, by the way, tonight it's going to be dark at like 3 o'clock, right? Thank you, Daylight Savings Time, Benjamin Franklin, whoever's problem that was. I don't know why you took it out on us. But tonight it's going to be dark like before dinner time. But what are we going to do? How do we respond to that? We turn on the lights. And so we're going to press into the culture of Jesus' day, because they can't walk over to a switch on the wall and flip the lights on, but rather light was a different type of commodity in the day that Jesus lived. And so we're going to explore what is taking place within this metaphor. And so it's going to take us a moment to look at this and then bring it all back to application, because I believe that as Jesus begins, really this Sermon on the Mount is one of the most applicable. It's hard to say that any part of the Bible is more applicable than others, but this Sermon on the Mount has such strong and profound implications on you and I, even here today, nearly 2,000 years later. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's look here at the text. Verse number 13. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, was he saying be salty? Is he saying go around and be mad? Some of us, we like to be salty and we're like, yes, justification, okay? That's not what it's saying. He says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? You see, here, as Jesus is speaking, he is saying that you are the salt of the earth, or what really this is, the salt from the earth. This word earth here is not the same word as like world. Sometimes today we say earth, we think of the planet. This is salt that comes from the earth or comes from the soil. He's saying you are like that salt, which really for us, the first question that we ought to ask approaching this verse is we should ask this: what is salt? What is salt? And really when I say that, what is salt used for? Because the fact is that salt in our day is used for a few things. And in that day, it was used for some of those things, but probably in a greater degree. If we go back, if we rewind to even just a few decades ago, you and I right now, if we had food that we wanted to preserve for any length of time, okay? Let's say that James goes out next week, in a couple weeks here, and gets his monster buck, right? And then he takes the meat from this venison from this deer. Where is that meat going to go? All over the place, right? So it's going to be preserved in one way or another. It really depends on what you do with the meat. But if you and I, if we go out grocery shopping and we want to keep something for a long time, we're going to place it into a specific area in our house, which is called the freezer. We're going to freeze it. How long have we been able to do that as a civilization? Not a whole long time, right? I mean, before that, you had ice boxes that were literally ice boxes. But prior to any of that, first century Mediterranean world, where are you getting ice from? I mean, you're not. You're going, I mean, you're not, okay? So instead, what would be used for preservation would be this salt. And so salt was valuable because of its ability to preserve. And so as Jesus is speaking, he's saying, you are the salt of the earth. In part, I believe this is because of the ability of salt to preserve. Not only that, but salt does what? When we eat our food, we know if it's got too much or too little salt, right? Maybe you've been making something and then you finish it and you go to take a bite and you're like, something's not right. Oh no, I forgot the salt. Because there's no savor to that. Salt is missing as an ingredient. And so we see that salt has this ability to flavor and to preserve. We see that salt has these characteristics that really can't be matched by any other substance to the same degree. And salt, being a natural substance, was a thing that people would flock to in the first century. In fact, you may have heard the phrase, so-and-so is worth their salt. And that came as a result of people being paid in salt. The culture of this day, it was like currency, where you would do work and you could either be paid in coins or you may be paid, and many of the Roman soldiers were paid in salt. It was such a valuable commodity. But then he poses this question before he goes even into the second illustration. He says this: if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? So here's the question. What salts salt? What salts salt? Could you imagine, maybe you're at home and you're making something in the kitchen and you bring out the salt and you begin to go to pour your salt into a container. Maybe it's a soup, or maybe you're boiling some water and you want to add some salt, whatever. But you begin to pour that in, and let's say the container slips out of your hand and goes into the liquid. What do you use to get the salt back out of that shaker? What do you use to make it salty again? Do you use anything to make it salty again? What do you do with that salt? Well, it's done for, right? If the water gets up in there, if it's your salt shaker, you're going to take the lids off, you're going to wash it out, and you're going to let it dry, and you're going to use it again. But what's happening to the salt? Salt's gone. The savor of the salt has vanished. So he says, hey, if the salt has lost its savor, what's taking place here? He says, what's the words of Jesus? He says, it's good for nothing. To be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. And so what's happening? He's saying it's going to be trampled under feet. In those days, they didn't have the same kind of garbage sanitation programs like we do. And so what would they do? They would take that salt. And when the salt was done for, really when that salt, it wasn't pure as what we have today. And so they would take that salt, they would scatter it on the road. They would throw it out into these dirt paths, or they would throw it out into their walkway leading up into their house. And so they would just discard the salt. It was harmless. People would walk over it, and it was just getting it out of your house. Some strong implications taking place here when it comes to salt. Because if the salt is not functioning in the way that it's designed to function, where is it going to get salted from? Now, who is he talking about when he says, you are the salt of the earth? Who is the salt of the earth? His disciples, right? And so maybe we could take this question and spin it into who disciples the disciples? Who comes and who convinces the people of God that it's worth following after God? Well, that's our job is to be doing it, right? Our job is to be getting others to follow after. What organization comes and kicks the church along? Well, there's not one, is there? The church is the one that's given this mission of Christ. And so we see that there's a need for this salt. This salt is valuable. This salt is necessary. This salt is something that has a job to perform. In the same vein, he continues, and he changes this illustration. Look at verse number 14. He says this, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So I want to play a game. I want to play a game with you guys today. Who's ready for a game? Ready for a game? All right. Eli's ready for a game. Perfect. All right. Let's play a game. I'm going to play a game, and it's called Find the City. In just a moment, I'm going to have our technology team throw up on the screen a picture of a city, and you are going to have to find the city in the picture, okay? So make sure you look hard. Make sure how many of you guys think you're up for this? Your eyes are ready. They're peeled. How many of you guys are good at like word searches and find the differences? You guys good at this? Okay, great. All right, Mike, if you would go ahead and when you find it, raise your hand. Wow, some of you guys still haven't found it. That's incredible. Let me just offer you my glasses because where is the city? It's sitting on the top of this hill. And this is a real city that exists in Italy today. And so it's a really a beautiful fortress. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of it because I don't want to offend any Italian people because it just wouldn't come out right. Okay, so let's try again. Let's try again. We're going to play another round of this game. And so if you struggled with this one, I want you to do your best. Do your best. No judgment, but judgment. All right, we're judging you if you can't find it. All right, Mike, would you give us the second one? Anyone find it? Anyone see it? It's the same city at night. So let me ask you this. If you're traveling in this area, how difficult is it, do you think, to find that city? It's not. And so what is Jesus saying here? He begins this verse. Leave that up there for me for a second, Mike. He begins this verse. He says, you are the light of the world. And then he says, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So a city that is on top of a hill, this is a really, it's a normal instance in Jesus' day. In fact, Jerusalem was a city that was set on a hill. And everybody in this crowd would have traveled to Jerusalem for pilgrimages and things like that. And so Jerusalem actually sits on top of a mountain. So when you read your Bible, a lot of times it'll say they went up to Jerusalem. It doesn't matter if they're coming from the south. It doesn't matter if they're coming from the north. They could be coming from the north, going south, and they're going to say up to Jerusalem. Why? Elevation. It's a city set on a hill. But what we see is that when a city is elevated above everything else around it, you can't miss it. During the daytime, it's there. It exists. It's bright. It's lit up. Most of the city walls that we'll be talking about in the first century, the walls of Jerusalem and others, would be primarily a limestone type of mixture that would have built up these walls. So very light in their pigment, very reflective. And so these cities are going to stand out from a long way off. And then at night, it's no different because what are you seeing? You're seeing the fires and the lights from the gates and from the walls. You're seeing this city just radiating into the world around it. You can't hide it. When I lived in the Southwest, one of the things that amazed me out there was just the sky feels so much bigger because the trees are all either shorter or non-existent in the Southwest. And so the horizon just looks so far, so distant. Especially when there's no haze, a clear night. And from where I lived, you could actually even see a shadow. You could see above, coming from the mountains on the other side of the valley that we lived in, you could see a glow coming from Los Angeles. Which was about 70 miles away. And you could see this glow at night if you were out far enough away from the city lights right there. Because a city, it's hard to hide. It's impossible to hide a city. Cities don't just disappear. They exist, they shine, they are visible. But why does he give this illustration? Because he says, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. And then what does he continue in? Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. It gives light to all in the house. And so what's the application? What is he getting at? Verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Can I tell you guys this today? God has placed you where you are to be a light. God has placed you where you are to be a light. Whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your job, whether it's in the school that you attend, no matter where you are, God has placed you in that place. God did not make a mistake when you bought your house, when you signed that contract, when you any of those things. God was not caught off guard when you went where you are. But God knows, and God placed you there, and God allowed you to be there, and he put you where you are to be a light. The question is not, am I a light? The question is, what are we doing with that light? This illustration that he's giving, I love this illustration that he's giving. Because what he's doing is he's saying, when you have a light, there is a purpose for that light. Today, I think we take advantage of, and we have the ability to take advantage of having lights so easily accessible. But in the first century, we have to remember that the technology that we have today did not exist. And so when someone wanted a light, let's say that they also had daylight savings time, they're too smart to have that then. What did they do? When it got dark, what would they do? They would have to light a candle. Now, does the candle give off this immense amount of light? No. I mean, it's not blinding everybody. But let's also remember that a candle is a resource, right? A candle dwindles, and it burns out eventually. But could you imagine how foolish it would be to take a candle and to cover it up? Why would someone even do that? In fact, I want to go ahead. Let's take a look at this. Let's see what this actually looks like for us. So I have a quasi candle. It's almost a candle. Look at that. Anybody afraid of the dark in here today? Oh, good. Mike, would you help me out here then? All right. That thing is bright. Oh, there we go. Can anybody see this? Did it look this bright when the lights were on? No, it didn't, did it? Let's keep going with this. We're going to kind of press into this illustration this morning. Sorry for all of you guys watching us online. There it is. Beauty. You're seeing what we see. I'll leave that open. All right. I'm going to go ahead, and as we're looking at that candle, what would happen, let's say I have a few others. We're going to use these here in just a moment, so I'm going to need a few volunteers here in a few seconds. But look at this candle. We see this light. Now, this light is raised up. Hey, Roy, how difficult would it be to turn these lights off back here? Be careful, please. You can use your phone. You can turn a light on. Let's not lose Roy in the middle of this. You hear a loud noise, pray for Roy. All right. So let's say we have this light. We have this light here. It's even flickering. How cool is that? Now, I'm going to take this light. Ooh, now it's dark for real. Look at that. I'm going to take this light, and I'm going to put a basket over it. Brighter or darker? It's darker, and this is a pretty loose-knit basket, but it's definitely darker. Without that, I was able to read my Bible up here. I can open this up and I can put it right here and I can say, you are the salt of the earth. I put this on, the words have disappeared. Why would someone in their right mind take a light and cover it up? It doesn't make any sense, right? But yet, we are so often covering or hiding our light. You see, I think we would all agree that we live in a world that is in darkness. Darkness is representative of evil, of sin, of things that are opposed to God. But can I ask you a question? How do we respond to darkness? What would happen if I were to sit in this room and instead of asking Mike to turn the lights back on, which we'll do here in just a few minutes, instead of doing that, if I were to just say, oh man, can you believe how dark it is? Oh man, can you just imagine I complained and I bemoaned and I cursed the darkness? What is the darkness going to do to that? How is the darkness going to respond? It's not. It's going to stay dark. But you know what I can do is I can allow the light to be seen in the darkness. We don't turn off the dark, we turn on the light. And you know what's special about light is that darkness never defeats light, does it? Darkness doesn't drive out light. It can't be so dark in this room that the light just disappears and it's overwhelmed, can it? But what do we see? When the light is off, there is no light. When the light is on, there is a light. And so the question here that Jesus is implying to his followers is, how does this light get out? How is this light to shine? Well, the fact is, I'm going to go around. I don't know where the edge of the stage is. Take the stairs. I got it. I got this. I got a light. Don't worry about me. I made it. You guys were all worried, weren't you? I've fallen down those stairs before. But what happens? Some of you think I'm kidding. What happens if we wanted to light up this room? How would we light up this room? If this is my light, how would I light up this room? Well, let's begin with, what is this light? Jesus says that you are the light of the world, but really we know that that light is a light that is ignited through the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus for our sins. John tells us that Jesus is the light of the world. He speaks of John, and he said John came to bear witness of the light. He wasn't that light, but he came to bear witness of the light, that light being Jesus. So as long as I'm a follower of Jesus, I also am commissioned to be a part of that light. Well, if we wanted to take this light and apply this to the room, how would we do so? If we only had candles or we only had a flame to work with, what would we do if we wanted more light? We would what? We would light another candle, right? Now we have two of them. Hey, Jacob, get over here. Be careful. Oh, I almost lost new Jacob. All right. This is Jake, if you haven't met him. All right. And then if we wanted to spread this, what would we actually do? If we wanted to continue, one light becomes two, and then what would happen to two lights? If we wanted to continue this light, now there's still not enough light in here, Jacob, so all right, perfect, all right, good. It's not that hard, there's a black switch on the bottom. All right, great. Now we have 4 lights. Is it brighter in here than it was a moment ago? Yes. And let's say I take this light. I'm going to pass it along. Jason, how are you, buddy? I'm going to give you a light. All right, here we go. Jacob, go. Come on, don't hold on to them. Don't keep them to yourself. Wow. Some people, they just don't want anyone else to have any light, right? All right, Lance, I'm going to come to you. There you go, buddy. I think that's Lance. I don't know who that was. All right. But what happens is this light continues to spread. This light continues to shine. The light doesn't stay put. You know what's also incredibly cool about light? Deb, this is for you. You know what's great about light? Is that light is not a finite resource. Light is not a resource that by lighting another candle, my light goes out. So many things in life, when we share them, we lose our ability to access them. We lose our grasp on them. But when it comes to light continues to shine, light continues to spread. Larry, here you go. I know you're trying to read. So what do we see? We see that light shines and light spreads in darkness. Until finally, that as that light multiplies, Jeff, here you go, buddy. That's what you get for sitting on an aisle seat. Is that now these lights are spread out. Now, if you have one of these, do me a favor really quick and cover it up. We're going to cover up our lights. All right? I'm going to count to 3 all together. I want you to hold it up as high as you can. 1, 2, 3. Is there a difference in the illumination of the room? Now, this is a very large room, and we're trying to cover it with like 6-watt candles. All right? But you see the point. Mike, if you would turn the lights back on. Close your eyes for a second. Brace yourselves, all right? The light of the world is not meant to be hidden, not meant to be kept to ourselves. In the darkness that we live in, we can make a choice about what we do and how we handle the darkness. We can take the darkness and we can just yell at it and curse at it and scream at it and say, can you believe all of the darkness? Or we can take the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ and we can go do something about the darkness. We can go be salt and be light. Because we are not called to stay put. We are not called to take our light and hide it under a basket, but we're called to take that light and to spread it wherever we can. And the fact is that many of us, it's a lot more comfortable to take that light. We're like, we don't want it to shine too bright. We're doing like we just did now, right? We cover our eyes. We put it under that basket. It's easier to be a Christian. Can I tell you this? It's easier to be a Christian at home. It's easier to be a Christian in private. It's easier to be a Christian in secret. But that's not what we are called to do. Because if we love those people that we work with, those people that we live next to, those people that we are related to, we have to take the gospel to them. If we believe the gospel, we are compelled to go and to take it with us. Because you are the light of the world. If you're not the light of the world, what's going to illuminate? If the church is not going to shine brightly, what is? If the church isn't going to salt, what is? What lights, what ignites a flame except another flame, except a spark? What else can do that job? There isn't. And so if the light of the world is not going to shine, there will not be light. You and I are the messengers that God has commissioned and committed to this work. And let me tell you this. Salt and light do no good in barrels and baskets. Salt and light do no good in barrels and in baskets. If we were to pool all of the salt that we have and to put it together and say, look at how much salt I have, that salt is worthless until it is actually applied to something. That salt doesn't help anybody when it's staying in the basket. A light that is hiding underneath something, a covering, doesn't do anyone any good. Oh, who is being helped by a light that's shining in an empty room? No one. We're called to take that light and to go and to light up the world. And then what's going to happen? What does Jesus say is going to happen there in Matthew chapter number 5? He says, let your light shine before men that they may what? That they may see. Let your light shine that they may see. What are they going to see? What are they going to see? Your good works. So that's the beginning of this. The beginning of this is those good works. We looked at Operation Christmas Child. I'm going to use this as an example. What's the purpose of packing up these boxes and putting resources in there and sending them out? Why do we partner with this organization and not so many others who are doing good? Because they're going to take the gospel and they're going to use that as a tool for the gospel. They're going to take the good news of Jesus, the death, the burial, the resurrection, and they are going to apply it to the lives of these children. And they're using this as a way to open up the door, that they may see your good works. Now, what happens to good works outside of, apart from God? What good are good works without God? Well, what if they saw our good works? What are they supposed to see? That they may see your good works and what? Glorify who? God, your Father, the one who gave us this new birth, this new life. Are they supposed to see our good works and glorify us? wow, that Mark, he is such a great guy. And he is, but he doesn't want me to say that. Why? Because it's not about Mark. It's not about us. It's not about the bearers of the light. It's about the light that we carry. And so the point is not that they see the good work or they see that light and say, wow, what a beautiful candle. What a beautiful illumination. No. They're supposed to see our good works and glorify our Father. The same one that we are bringing glory to. Because this is the gospel. John the Baptist, I think he said it best in John chapter 3, verse 30, when he said, he must increase, I must decrease. I don't need glory. You know what happens actually to a candle as a candle burns? What does it do? It melts. The light burns, consumes the candle. You and I, our lives are finite. Anyone in the day and age that they're hearing this, if they're thinking of a light that is in their homes, it's a light that is a temporary light. It's not a light that's going to go on. It's not an LED bulb that lasts for 10,000 hours or whatever. No. It's a flame, and it's going to consume, and it's going to burn, and eventually the day of that is going to run out. The fact is that you and I, we have this limited amount of time to be a carrier of the light of the gospel. It's called our life. We spoke today of a man and a woman whose lives were committed to the cause of Christ. And now their lives on this earth have come to an end. You see, Jim Johnson, I love the man, miss him dearly. Jim doesn't have another opportunity to share the gospel with someone. He doesn't. But you know who does? We do. We have breath, we have life, we have received this gift of the light of Jesus Christ, and we can still be a light. Jim did it a number of times through his life, but eventually that life came to an end. And you know what? Ours will too. And so what are we doing with the gospel that we have to go? You see, salt and light, they don't do us any good when they're sitting in a barrel, when they're sitting in a basket, when they're stored away for some later time. In the gospel, the one illustration of the gospel that Isaiah gives is he calls the gospel a medicine. He speaks, he says, is there a balm? Is there a medicine in Gilead? But you know the thing about a medicine is a medicine's only effective if it's applied. It's only effective if it's given out. If it stays in the container, it does no good to anyone. And so really the question that I want to leave you with today, a very simple message, a very straightforward message, the question I want to leave you with today is this. If the church won't take the gospel to the world, who will? If the church won't take the gospel to the world, who will? Now, if you're sitting in here today and maybe you're sitting in here and you say, I don't know that I'm a Christian, or maybe I don't identify myself as a Christian. But listen, the good news of Jesus Christ is that good news that we're here to proclaim and we're here to lift up. You see, we have no light in and of ourselves. In fact, the Bible tells us that we were born into sin. Darkness is what we are in without Christ. But the fact is that sin can be forgiven, it can be cleansed, it can be washed away through the blood of Jesus Christ. He came, he lived a perfect life, never sinned. In him was no darkness at all, but only light. And yet he died, the death that we deserve to die. And then he was buried, and 3 days later rose again. All of this to pay for our sin, for yours and for mine. And we as the church, if we will not take this gospel to the world, who will? It's not the job of some other nonprofit. It's not the job of some other organization. Who did Christ give his life for? The church. Who does Jesus say that the gates of hell will not prevail against? The church. And just that very phrase, the gates of hell. Are gates for offense or defense? Well, gates don't charge and move, do they? Gates stay still. Gates are a defensive structure. And if the gates of hell won't prevail against the church that Jesus said he would establish, we'll get there in a little while in the book of Matthew, but if the gates of hell will not stand against it, what does that imply that the church of God is doing? going, being, taking on that darkness, not sitting idly by. I understand that it's a world where things look intimidating and things look dark, but the fact is that the gospel of Jesus Christ has just as much power today as it did in the first century when Jesus died. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. His power doesn't wax and wane and come and go and ebb and flow. No, his power is constant. It always is. And the truth of the gospel compels us to take the good news, the light that lights and can light every man that enters into this world, to those in need of it. So my question here is not just generally speaking church, but my question here is individualistic. Where are you going with the gospel of Jesus Christ? It's easier to hide it. It's easier to be comfortable in our Christianity and to keep it inside the walls where we know people are going to agree with us and they're going to think the same as us. It's comfortable to do that. I get it, I do. But that's not why we are here. Just like a flame is not meant to be hidden, just like salt is not meant to stay inside of its container, we are called to be applied to the areas that we are needed. So how about it, church? How do we respond? Who in our lives is in need of the gospel? The person that we meet out at lunch? The coworkers who we see how they live their lives? They put on the tough face, but we see the emptiness and the hurt and the pain. The neighbor who's friendly but keeps their distance. The teacher at your child's school. Who is it? You see, we live in a community. There are 150,000 people in Monroe County. 150,000. And I don't know the numbers for every church within our area, but I know the numbers for Baptist churches in our area. We might have 1,000. In a Baptist church on a given Sunday morning. That means that there are 149,000 people that aren't in a church like this on a Sunday. We can multiply that out a little bit and add some other churches. Our Baptist church is the largest evangelical denomination. Let's say that there are 20,000 people. I think that's pretty generous. 20,000 people in church in our area on a Sunday morning, committed their lives to following after Jesus. That only leaves us 130,000 people to reach. We have a call. We have a command. Let's take this light and to be the light of the world. So my question to you today is twofold. If you are a believer in Christ, what are you doing with this light? And if you're in here today and you haven't put your faith in Christ, hey, listen, today's the day. Don't continue living in darkness. You don't have to. Today's the day of salvation. Today's the day to believe. Not to put it off and to wait for another convenient time. The convenient day never comes. So how do we respond to the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ?